Okay, Chris, again, thank you so much for having the Pi Kappa Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated in your home and in your business. Thank you, and it's a esteemed pleasure for us because part of our international mandate is to support the economic growth and development of our community, and specifically that of Black businesses. I said, but it bears repeating, that you started your esteemed career as the male face of Ralph Lauren. There was some other guy, Tyson, something, I don't recall. His name escapes me. But after, his era, you were the guy. And you traveled the world in that capacity and made a little bit of money, or really a lot of bit of money. Y'all, this gorgeous historic brownstone we're in, Chris calls the house that Ralph built. So shout out to that. And actually there's really power in I think what that means, right? Which is the leveraging of one opportunity to fund another. Right. And we want to talk about that a great deal. So you travel the world, you're this big global iconic brand everywhere you go. And I want to start by you explaining to us, Chris, when it became clear to you that not only you could pivot into something of your own, but that you should pivot into something of your own. And you didn't, you didn't start, for lack of a better term, bootleg. Like you kind of went in a grandiose posture at the onset. And I want you to speak to that because a lot of people broadly in our culture and community, they have a burning desire to do something of their own, but there's a lot of fear. So what was that thing for you that says, I can do this and I'm gonna do this?
It's funny because entrepreneurship wasn't something that was like very big in my family. Actually, there were no entrepreneurs in my family. So the idea to do something and create something of my own was so far-fetched, and I had a lot of doubt, and I was like, can I really do this? And I basically took what I learned from my years at Ralph. All the things that I learned, I wasn't just there taking photos, I was like observing like how he did his marketing and how he did his experience. And if you go to the mansion and on, an Upper West Side, like how you felt when you walked into a space. So in my little way, I wanted to create that here. And after I left, after my years at Ralph Lauren, that thing that I was supposed to do was always in front of me. I just didn't see it because my first love was fragrance. Like my dad wore like Aramis, he wore like all the like iconic fragrances in the 70s. And then as I got older and I started to make, my little bit of money, I started buying my own and kind of exploring in that world. And when I finished in fashion, I was like, well, what is it? What's next? What is that? And then I met a perfumer and went to France and learned the whole kind of, universe of perfume creation. And I was like, okay, well, there's that. And then there's no one that looks like me in perfume. There was no person of color at the time, man or woman. And when I had a conversation with my mentor, he said, Chris, if you do this, you got to do it right because they're going to come for you. Because they don't think you should be here. So I made sure I brought it when I launched.
Okay, I want to kind of slow you down because you said two things I want to tap into. They don't think you should be here. And I think every woman in this room, and I'm seeing some deep breaths, right? Like we all can kind of feel the weight of that. There is sadly a presumption of where Black folk belong. Right? The spaces where we should be and the capacity in which we should be there. And yet you had the audacity to disrupt that. I mean, I want to just name for y'all, right now, Chris is the only Black person, male or female, on the International Global Foundation of Fragrance. Just talk about where you, in the best way possible, your audacity to disrupt these spaces as a Black person and a Black man. Where does that come from?
Well, I don't know. It was just in me because, and you're right, it's the audacity because I knew that I was going to get looked at like, what are you doing here? So what I did was, in the beginning when I launched, I remember being in Paris and I was around one of my favorite parks, and I saw all this art about Harlem. And I'm like, well, what is the connection between Harlem and Paris? So then I started doing the homework, And I said, this is it. This is my angle. I have to tell the story. I have to tell the connection between Harlem and Paris, because no one has ever done that in perfume. No one. And it's a very incredible story, like with Josephine Baker, Langston Hughes, Duke Ellington, James Baldwin. So when I told that story, my first 3 fragrances, Harlem Nights, Dans Sauvage, story of Josephine Baker, and Renaissance.
Yes.
And the French loved it. They went crazy. They was like, oh, we love this. We never thought that anyone would ever tell this story. So it was almost strategic that I said, this is a story I need to tell first. And then after that, you know, I have many more stories to tell, and, you know, so I think that was important.
That was important. Let's, since you went there, let's talk about scaling. Because at some point, any business that has some level of sustainability and longevity has to at least start thinking about what scaling looks like, expanding the business looks like. And then there are some that would argue maybe not, right? There's some that argue that maybe the better business practice is to do what you do well in the space in which you do it and kind of contain that, you know, kind of space, you know, contain the valuation of that in that arena. What does Chris Collins say about to scale or not to scale? And if you do scale, what's the pacing of that looking like?
Well, it's funny because I think there are a lot of people that ask me, like, how do I start? Where do I start? What do I do? And my answer is, A, what are you willing to sacrifice? What are you willing to lose? Because you're going to risk everything, right? And then I say, well, what do you want? What do you want in the end? Do you want to build an empire and sell it to an Estee Lauder or L'Oreal, or do you want something that you want to keep in your family and then keep it for generations? Because either way is still good. And I think when you figure out what you want in the end, it'll dictate how you run the business. Because you'll make certain decisions like, okay, I'm preparing for this.
And I think this is a good time to name an aspect of business growth and scaling, specifically as it relates to Black businesses, that some people either are not aware of or they don't necessarily understand the nuance of. Because there is a narrative, Chris, that says when Black businesses become really successful and they do get acquired by an Estee or whoever that they're selling out, what I think people get so wrong about it is understanding the ability to still maintain some level of creative control, some level even of, you talked about ownership. Shout out to Halston. That's a tragic tale if you don't know. Halston sold his name and ruined everything. So Chris is being extremely wise in insisting upon retaining ownership of the name. So just kind of speak to those two things. Why is the name ownership important, and why is it not selling out to ascend up?
Such a good question, because it's happened to so many Black-owned brands. And what people need to understand is I own 100% of my business. And I own 100% of my business. And it takes a lot. You know, it takes a lot day to day. People don't understand. 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm up. I'm in bed after midnight, a few hours of sleep. There are no weekends. There are no vacations. And I think what people need to understand is there's only but so far I can take it. So I can fight tooth and nail to get it to a certain point, and that's what these companies want. And then you say, take me to another level. They have resources that I can never tap into. They have distribution that I can never, you know, get into. So it's not selling out, it's expanding the business. And, you know, in our community, we think, well, you sold out because it's not for us. And that's not true. I created it for us. I created it for the world. So I want to be able to reach, you know, little Black boys and girls in Nigeria, in France, in the UK. I can't do that on my own unless I have distribution and support. So I don't think it's selling out. I just think it's saying, okay, well, I've fought tooth and nail to get my business to A. Now have someone help you to get it to B and C.
And just as a tangible example of what that looks like, ladies, for instance, Chris, at least the last 3 years I've known you, on any given week, Chris is in Dallas, he's in Atlanta, he's in Detroit, he's at all at Nordstrom stores or all at Bloomingdale stores, right? Seattle this weekend. And he's just one person, right? And if it is to be that the world of Chris Collins is available globally, if it's to be that there's a pop-up that's popping up in Memphis, Tennessee, and in Montreal in Canada, he can only be in one place, right? So just kind of legitimizing the tangible aspect of where the growth model is beneficial to the community. So while we're seeing all of this wonderful product, ladies, of the world of Chris Collins on display, what I want to inquire about is, in a world that says there can only be one of us in a space at a time, how are two people who the world says should be chief competitors, right? The world says should be in a whack-a-mole situation where one is trying to undermine the success of the other, and yet you two are exceptional friends, not only just in a friendship context, you actually support one another's businesses, you support one another's brands. So as you see what I'm getting at, you are the epitome, and I'm so much in admiration of you and Terry Chris, because you defy and you disrupt a narrative that says you are not my competition, you are my collaboration partner. Right. You are my protection in many ways. Talk about the importance of friendship within the space.
It's funny because I just saw Terry today, dressed down, taking packages at UPS. She's doing the same. Yeah. A lot of people don't see that part. Yeah. They see us dressed up at the Fragrance Foundation Awards, but it's work, and we both know that, and we know each other's pain points. We talk about it. We help each other. We support each other. The reality is there is enough space.
Please say that part.
The reality is that there is enough space. The perception is that there isn't. So if you go to Nordstrom or you go to Saks, you'll see all the perfume brands. You'll see 20, 25 brands. How many of them black-owned will you see? If any, thank goodness I'm in all those stores like Bergdorf Goodman, Saks, Nordstrom. Okay. So, LifeFlex. But the idea is now, how many spaces will we have there, right? So there is enough space, but we're still, and you mentioned the 15% pledge, which is a powerful movement. It's giving all these great brands the opportunity. Just the opportunity, don't give me a handout. I don't need it. I got good fragrance. I got great marketing. I got a good story. Just give me the opportunity and I'll show you what I can do at Sephora, like other retailers. So like I said, the reality is that there is enough space, but the perception is that there's not. It's like we're fighting to get to like one or two spaces in these retailers.
Yeah, what I hear you saying in that, Chris, which is very important, I think, again, for all of us that might have businesses of our own, or even in the thinking stage of going into business, is there is enough space for all of us, which is an abundance mindset versus a scarcity mindset, right? Which is spiritual work, I believe. And then, what does it look like if I actually believe in abundance, and I believe there is enough space, and I do not believe that my brother or my sister who happens to look like me is the obstacle, but I understand on a deeper level, it is a system that is discriminatory in its existence that is my enemy.
Because you are not my enemy.
Right.
We're just fighting against
a system
to get that space.
Correct.
So therefore, the perception is that you are, but you're not.
You're not.
You're not my enemy. It's that we're fighting to get to, because there's not enough opportunity, enough space in these places.
And when we fight the system as the enemy and we change the system to create more pie, more space, we're not fighting over crumbs.
But people think we are.
Yeah.
And we may even think we are.
Sometimes we feed into that.
Right. But we're not. Yeah. If we have more opportunity, like when I was in fashion, when I was modeling for Ralph Lauren, I would go on these photo shoots and it would be me and it would be 8 or 9 other Caucasian men on photo shoots. So me and Tyson and Boris Kojo, we were friends, but we knew that it was only going to be one of us.
Right.
So we almost kind of was like very competitive with each other because I love those guys, you know, but we still had to fight for that one spot.
Yeah, because there's tokenism at play that says, again, the system mandates that only one of you 3 beautiful men gets an opportunity, but we're gonna have 7 blonde blue eyes.
That's the system. And they're, you know, and I knew all of them, and they were like, you know, they knew that the opportunity or the chance for them being on the shoot was way higher than me because it was only going to be one of us.
Yeah.
And now, and mind you, with that being said, Ralph Lauren, and I don't mean to go back into our fashion days.
No, please.
Ralph Lauren was one of those brands who was like very inclusive. I mean, like Naomi Campbell, I shot with her a bunch of times, and like there's like Tyra, there's like all like American Indian, excuse me. It's like all across the board, and yet still, there's only a few spaces available.
Yeah, it's a systemic thing, and I just want to go back to, I just really applaud you, both you and Terry, because I see it, and I don't think it's an accident that you and Terry, Chris, are both ascending together.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like literally, if that narrative of scarcity were true, one of you would be here and the other would be here.
Right.
But what instead is happening is you are both here.
Right.
At the same time, literally in the same room.
Right.
So it is a proof of concept that there is indeed enough space.
There's enough space.
Thank you for that.
Yes.
I want to move on to, y'all have heard me mention, and Chris mentioned the 15% pledge a few times. I don't want to take for granted that everybody is familiar with that. So this is a young woman, Aurora Jones? James. Aurora James, a really powerful woman. She is a designer in her own right. Brother Felix?
Brother Velis.
Brother Velis is her brand, primarily jeans and some other things, shoes as well, leather goods. And she is the originator of this concept where she has charged publicly, I think this started, with her asking all of the major retailers globally to reserve 15% of their shelf space for Black and brown businesses, right? I want to expand this to swords in the room who maybe work at companies or in spaces where the tragic murder of Brother George Floyd in the summer of 2020 led a lot of people to say a lot of things, right? A lot of people made pledges and promises to do better by Black folk. And of course, we all know today that most of that has not only disappeared, it has aggressively been rolled back.
And being challenged as we speak.
As we speak. And so in the face of that, I'm going to call it a regression as it relates to this work of Black inclusion. Talk about how important the 15% pledge has been for you personally, the brand of the world of Chris Collins and these fragrances. I want to say you were on shelves in Sephora.
Well, yes.
Or you talked to tell me about it.
So what Aurora, her movement, was so important to businesses like mine because it made or like forced the hand of certain retailers to give brands like mine and Terry's a chance.
Yeah.
So again, like I said before, we didn't want any handouts, we just wanted the opportunity. And then once we got on the shelves, we showed what we can do.
Yeah.
You know, I'm on the shelf next to Tom Ford and Creed, you know, and,
Come on, man.
and I belong there. And there was no time at all that I felt like I did not belong there.
So I belong there.
Well, without the 50% pledge, maybe most of those opportunities might not have happened.
Yeah.
I had a lot of support coming into the world of fragrance, so you know most brands don't.
Yeah.
You know, most brands don't have the opportunity to know perfumers that will call a buyer at Bergdorf Goodman and say you need to see his stuff because it's really good. So it was important, and and like you mentioned, DEI programs are getting rolled back. They have laws coming up that are 1,800 laws that are like taking away from the ability of Black women to get loans.
Yes.
To
He's talking about the Fearless Fund.
The Fearless Fund.
Yeah.
I mean, what's happening right now is just
It's
we're
devastating.
going backwards.
Yeah, it's devastating. So thank you for explaining, the importance and in your real lived experience, how one person.
Yep.
And her amplified voice, because it's like she said it, she started it, and then many other, mostly Black outlets and other mainstream outlets. I know I interviewed her on my Griot show. Now it's a groundswell. So it really just shows how a moment goes into a movement and how it literally makes a bottom line difference.
It does.
For a business owner like yourself.
Yes.
Let's talk about money.
Okay.
We're here to talk about economic wealth building. What we do know is that most businesses fail within 3 to 5 years.
Right. Some within the first year.
Some within the first year. But when you're talking about 3 to 5, I mean, it's like an 80% failure rate.
Right.
Most businesses fail at that point. And yet some move on. You started in what year?
2018.
2018. So to God be the glory, you've already passed that
Yes.
window. Can we just applaud that?
Thank you.
So by definition, you are exceptional, and this brand is exceptional.
Right.
And I want you to remember
Thank
that
you.
on the hard days.
Thank you. And there are a lot of hard days.
And I know there's a lot of hard days. I know. So that's what we're getting to. When it comes to the hard days, because again, speaking to my sorors here that have businesses or aspire to, when you run into things like cash flow problems, when you run into things like distribution challenges, when you run into small things, not to out you, but to just real life example, could seem small, but probably feels very big to this brother because this is his baby, this is his brand. When you run out of the beautiful bags, you know, consumer bags that you have, and there's not enough, those are the hard days, right? How important is it that Black businesses receive access to capital, receive access to business loans? What does that process look like from a financial lens that says, this is how I can move, this is what I need financially, talking about the money, Chris, to make it to 2025 and 2026?
It's very important. And the truth is, this is more difficult for Black-owned brands to get funding. I don't know that if I was a white-owned brand, if I would already have funding. But I do know that it's just, you know, it's a fact. It's just harder to get funds. We have to prove ourselves more.
Yeah.
Because especially in fragrance, you know, there was not really that many in the space, and people don't really understand, you know, what the future of it is, and you know, what's your reach, and you know, what is the power of your dollar and of the Black dollar, and there's a lot of question marks. But at the end of the day, all we ever need is for someone just to believe in it, believe in us, believe in the brand.
Yeah.
And I believe that if we were to get funding, that we would be as competitive as any other brand. But it's just difficult.
And is that, like, tangibly, so we understand, is that going to Chase or Wells Fargo? Is that going to grant funding? Where are the sources that you have identified in your experience in the last 7-ish years? And I know, you know, probably some pre-work to get to that point, Chris. Where are you sourcing funds?
Well, right now it's all the company. Like, the company is profitable, so I'm taking the money and putting it back into the business.
Okay.
Besides just having money, you also need the strategic part. So there's a lot of private equity firms that provide the money, and then there's some strategic businesses that work with private equity funds that help you in that sense too. So there's so many different ways. You just got to figure out what's best for the business. But you can't scale without it. You can scale, but it's going to take a lot slower than it would if you just had the injection of, you know, the cash and the strategic support.
And the strategic support.
Yeah.
Now, I heard you say, and we applauded because I asked them to, the fact that you own 100% of your business.
I do.
Now, when we start talking about bringing in private equity, or we start talking about bringing in other, you know, venture capitalists, angel investors, we could be talking about offloading ownership of the business.
You will offload ownership. Yeah.
Okay, so talk about that.
So, depending on how young your brand is and the revenue that your brand is making, is how much you potentially will be giving up, because it's more risk if you're not doing X amount of millions or whatever it is that what the threshold is. So you have to know when it's time. And when it's time is when you're saying, I've done all that I can do to get to this point. Now I need the investment to get to this point. So it's different for every business. Some businesses don't want it. Some businesses just want to just take their time, build something that they love. They don't care about acquisition. They don't care about all that stuff. But that goes back to your strategy. That goes back to the end game. Like, what do you want? So I'm being told that the money is kind of like drying up all over beauty for some reason.
I think it's Rihanna's. I think it's Rihanna's fault.
Well, Rihanna, she's
just taking it all with Fenty.
All of
it. Yeah.
But I think, you know, it's like it's necessary at a certain point in your business. Yeah. And I'm getting to that point.
Sure.
Because, you know, distribution in Canada, Europe, Africa, all over the world. It's a it's an opportunity to be a global business.
Yeah.
Even though I am, international, global is a whole different ballgame.
From a distribution lens. From a distribution lens. Yeah, because marketing-wise, you are global. Marketing-wise,
yeah.
I've seen,
with social media and, YouTube and all
also
that.
Cut. I mean, you've had the ad placements, right? I've seen you in Cut magazine. I've seen you in the New Yorker. I've seen, you Google World of Chris Collins, you're going to see this man's face, and then also really smart Q&As around getting to understand the story.
Right.
So that's going to take me to my next question, actually. When you're talking about a product, which you have, it's sitting up, we're looking at it. The product is important. The product has to smell good. The product has to have good ingredients behind it. But we also know, as you told us indirectly, when you started this thing and you launched Harlem Nights and Renaissance, you really were selling a story.
Right.
Talk about how important it is for us as business owners, Chris, to be clear about our story.
There is no good brand without a good story. Period.
No good brand without a good story.
Think about the brands that you love. They all have a story. They all have a point of view. They all have a position. And that is, in my opinion, the most important. There's a lot of good brands that have a great story, therefore they're successful.
Yes.
And there's a lot of...
Product, by the way, but story, very compelling.
They're really good at storytelling.
Yeah.
And that is something that I focus on 100%, because you have to believe me, trust me, want to hang out with me. I like this guy.
Yeah.
He's relatable. I love his story about the fragrance and his father and memory and this and that, because the story is important. Because there's a ton of fragrances out there. You could buy anything you want. There's thousands, but you're going to buy the ones that you are connected to. And that's why my names of my fragrances are interesting. They all come from a personal place or fantasy, but they all are from me. And that's all important.
And also who you are, right? Like, so again, with like the Carol's daughter, understanding the story of the sisters and, all these things, that's a part of why many of us, doing hair on a Saturday morning in a kitchen sink, we know these, when you challenge yourself to think about it, Source, the brands we love and are in relationship with, specifically when it's not the celebrity-led brands, it's because we also are connected to the story.
Right.
So I just want y'all to take that with you this evening, whether it's, I know Sora Natalie has, Sorry, Natalie. I don't know. You look like April for a minute. Sorry about it. Sorry, Natalie has a small business with her cousins where they're creating really cute garb and attire for children and babies, in the form of legacy, whether it's HBCUs or homage to the D9. And part of why that brand, I think, is going to be successful is because it's the story of their family,
right.
And each of their individual ties to Spelman or A&T and AKA. So it's connective tissue. So just think about, as you think about your business, what is the story? And by the way, I don't think that's just a product, right? Like, I have a business. I don't have a product, unless you count my books. But even for the podcast, it's a story, right? Like my genesis of the struggle of being a first-generation college student, then becoming the first in my family to go to law school, and then using that expertise to say, I know everybody's not going to have the privilege and the resources to make these generational leaps as I have. So now I'm giving back to my people the knowledge of the law through this medium.
Right.
So get clear about what your story is, because it's going to be important to your success.
Right.
Final question from me, Source. Please be thinking. I'm going to take two, probably just two questions for Chris, and then we're going to move on to the program. My final question for you, Chris, is you've talked a lot about mentors.
Yes.
You talked about how somebody can pick up a phone and say to Bergdorf or Bloomingdale's, hey, this guy's got something special, you should check it out. Not many people can do that. Talk about the importance of building those relationships even before you had a business to sell. Mentorship
is so important. On those days where it's like dark and you don't understand what's going on, leaning on your mentor. They've probably been through it, probably seen it, even if it's not even in the same business. Mentorship, and also it is my responsibility to provide mentorship to others. I get DMs and messages all the time of people saying like, where do I start? How do I start? What do I do? I have mentors. I'm doing some mentoring with young black and brown men and women, kids, and my brother's a school teacher. I go to the school and I talk to the kids all the time. There was a moment that I needed a break from New York, so I moved to London for a little bit, and I met India Gary Martin, and she became my mentor. She's from the DC area, and she was like this powerful black woman. She was like in banking at the time, and if it wasn't for her, I don't even think I'd even be in fragrance, because we had a conversation one day, and she said, "Chris, what do you want to do? Like, what, I was towards the tail end of my fashion career, and she was like, what do you want to do?" And I said, "I think I want to do something in fragrance." So she mapped it out. She said, "You're going to go to this place in France.
Yeah, you told me this. Okay, yep.
And you're going to just go to these fragrance houses, and you're going to ring the doorbell, and you're going to say, 'Will someone talk to me?'" And I did it. And I would not have probably have had the courage or known what to do if it wasn't for her. And I literally went and knocked on every door until someone would talk to me. And a few people shut the door.
Yep.
A few people opened the door. And that started the whole motion of,
Of what we
fragrance.
see today.
Yeah.
It's incredible. All right, so it's 2 questions. Don't be shy. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time and your opening your home to us.
My pleasure.
tonight. Question around what's next in
Yeah.
terms of we have a fragrance.
Yep.
14.
Yeah. What 14 fragrances?
Yeah.
So what's next in terms of candles?
Yeah.
Like how are you going to expand this brand for us?
Well, the idea when I launched was always to be like a lifestyle brand. It wasn't just fragrance. I want to do more body, more home. Even, I had this crazy idea of even doing like I love accessories, like leather goods and all that kind of stuff. I may stay beauty, I may keep it tight, and then eventually down the road kind of expand outside of that. But I do want to do more in body around scent, like oils and bath and all that kind of stuff. So that was always a plan. So hopefully very soon, definitely very soon, I'm going to start creating in that
Is the idea
space.
to expand the existing fragrance that you have and turn it into body butter or oils? Or
Yeah, like some of the best sellers, or maybe, create, some on their own. And I don't believe in like your home smelling like your body. So I may create some other ones with similar scent profiles and stuff like that. But yeah, it's that's one of the other ideas that I have, like keeping me up at night. So there's definitely a plan for expansion.
Yeah, and just to know, Source, that what you smell when you come into this space is Lust, is the candle that's burning. That's Chris's latest fragrance. And I do know a lot of people do want that. So
Yes.
can we expect a Lust candle?
Possibly, yes.
Okay,
I'm not
possible.
sure when, but I think, and if not, something like
Something in that profile.
Something in the profile.
Okay.
Maybe I got a million stories to tell. Maybe it gives you an opportunity to tell another story.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Final question, Source. Anybody? Yes. Sorry, Tracy.
Well, thank you once again for opening your home. Much of the beauty space now is dominated by women entrepreneurs. Like, what challenges have you faced as a man entering into the
Good question.
beauty space, especially as a black man?
Yeah. I didn't realize that in beauty there weren't as many men, period, own brands in beauty. So I think we're less trusted when it comes to like beauty, like true beauty, which I understand. But that's what kind of made me want to tell like a story of like the importance of like skincare for men, the importance of like upkeep and hygiene. And I was taught that at a very young age. And yeah, there are challenges of being a man in that space, but like I said, there's enough space. There's enough space for me. And I need for people to kind of trust that I know what I'm talking about in the space. So that's why I kind of stay with fragrance for now. And then eventually I'll lure you into like the other products, like the body, bath, and all that kind of stuff. So, but right now, fragrance is the space that I'm trying to become an expert in.
And that you're on your way to dominating.
Yes.
I'll say this too. I think we are our best advertiser.
Right.
Like when we walk around, there's a little bit of a brand ambassadorship that comes with that. So I remember when I first met Chris. First of all, I didn't even know I was meeting Chris. Like, I thought me and Terry was having drinks. I get to right up at
Right around the corner.
Sugar Monk. She got this good looking ass man. I was like, girl, you ain't say shit. Anyway, it's cool. It's cool. And what I did notice before you even opened your mouth was I just took you in visually, right? So I'm looking at what you're wearing. I'm looking at how you smell, not even knowing that you're in fragrance. I didn't know you from Adam, right? I'm looking at how you make eye contact. I'm looking at your glare. I'm looking at your the physicality of your body. And what was so clear to me, even again, before I knew that you were the face of Alpha Laurent, none of that, I did not have access to that information. But what was clear to me upon sight is that you were a tastemaker. This was a man, to your point of trusting, I'm getting to, right? This was a man who said before he left the house, there's only a certain way in which I'm going to present. And I think for those of us that own businesses, I talked about this a lot in my first book, right? Pretty Powerful, which all of y'all supported beautifully. And we don't have to have a fragrance or a podcast or a book to do this, Soars. Whatever it is in life that you are promoting, it could be your school, it could be your company, it could be the fact that you're a CPA, whatever it is, you are your brand ambassador. And how you show up in the world aesthetically and kind of kinetically is saying something. So I just want to acknowledge the power of you as your own brand ambassador.
Thank you for noticing that too, because
well, I couldn't miss it. Okay. Before we buy,
you want Lost in Paradise?
No, I got Lost in Paradise.
Okay.
I need
Long Kiss Goodnight.
Long Kiss Goodnight. Can somebody
someone
reach
grab
me? Long Kiss Goodnight. So, Soros, it's become clear throughout the evening that these are the two fragrances that most sorors have the most interest in.
Yes.
So I'm going to have Chris, this is our olfactory experience.
Yes.
Chris is going to walk us through the notes, from base note, mid note, top notes, and all the things for both fragrances. And then we're going shopping, and you're going to find what you want. You're going to come right here to the kiosk in the back, and you're going to spend some black dollars with a black man, okay? Great. Okay, we're going to start with Lost in Paradise. What is
Lost in
this?
Paradise. So Lost in Paradise is what I describe as being lost on an island. For me, it's Bora Bora. What it would smell like if you got lost. And I smell coconut, I smell gardenia, I smell the ocean, salted musk, I smell driftwood, it's woody. So that is how I ended up creating Lost in Paradise. Most of my fragrances kind of leaned more masculine before I did the white collection.
Okay.
And this was...
So it's not an accident that the Soars like these two.
Right.
Okay.
Because they're more floral.
Yeah.
So in fragrance, technically the one note that kind of separates masculine and feminine, although I think you should wear what you want. I was at Nordstrom last weekend and like men were falling in love with this. And you know, I don't tell them what's in it because as soon as you start telling people what's in it, we had this conversation, your mind goes somewhere else.
Yeah.
I'll let you smell it, and then when you fall in love with it, then when you ask me what's in it, I'll tell you. So Lost in Paradise is become one of my best sellers. It's fresh, it's oceanic, it's like the beach, it's vacation. So I think a lot of ladies in here really love this fragrance.
And what are the notes, some of the notes?
Oh, so coconut water, gardenia, salted musk, ylang ylang, which is kind of like a banana smelling fragrance, floral. So those are the main notes, and like sandalwood, cedarwood.
Beautiful vacation.
Yes.
Okay. And Long Kiss Goodnight. This is actually what I'm wearing tonight.
Long Kiss Goodnight, yeah. If you notice that a lot of my fragrances, all of my fragrances have interesting names. I think, again, every fragrance has to have a good story. I don't know if any of you seen the movie Long Kiss Goodnight before.
Gina Davis, Samuel L. Jackson, yeah.
Yeah. So that was kind of the idea. I wanted to create a fragrance. There was a woman who was a house mom, and then she was also an assassin. So I love that dynamic in a woman. So I created that behind that film. And this one is going to be fresh, but it's going to be a little bit more earthy. There's a coffee note in there, passion fruit. It has a lot of cedarwood, sandalwood, rose.
Okay.
So it's going to be a little slightly darker, but still fresh than Lost in Paradise. But they're both amazing, fresh scents.
Okay.
I think
Ladies, let's give Chris a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is great.
Well, thank you, Ebony. I mean, to put this together was incredible, and to meet all your sorrows, and you've always believed in the business, and I appreciate that, and thank you.